British forces artillery its influence in outer U.S. To that end, China has launched a multi-pronged defense upon its regional neighbors that includes charm, appeasement, political manipulation, and even outright economic coercion. Beijing's charm offensive has never worked out the way it hoped, and in fact ended up driving Australia even closer to the United States, to the point that the nation has now joined a trilateral pact with the US and UK to defend the Pacific. When Australia joined the United States in calling out China for its human rights abuses and genocide of the Uyghur people, China responded by economically punishing Australia, putting harsh tariffs on Australian goods, and resorting to outright sanctions. In response to these actions, a Chinese official said, "Will not allow any country to reap benefits from doing business with China," while groundlessly accusing and smearing China and undermining China's core interests based on ideology. The smear that insulted Beijing, Australia condemning the nation for photos like this, captured using a drone and smuggled out of the country, with a long history of chemically castrating Muslim minorities in its western provinces, separating families, imprisoning tens of thousands without a cause, and forcing Uyghur women to have abortions and undergo sterilization. China has rightly earned international condemnation for human rights abuses. The nation claims it's simply fighting extremism. The truth is, it's carrying out a quiet genocide, and an estimated million are already dead. But while Australia didn't bow to China's pressure to remain quiet on its human rights abuses and toe the Chinese Communist Party line, other small nations have, because they have no choice. For nearly a decade now, China has undertaken its Belt and Road Initiative. The modern Silk Road is meant to improve China's access to international markets by building infrastructure both at home and abroad. The biggest beneficiaries have been smaller, less developed nations who have received loans from the Chinese government to build much needed infrastructure with Chinese firms, of course. But problems come when the loans come due, as these generous loans provided by China often have outrageous repayment terms that China knew the host nation would never be able to adhere to, despite the promise of greatly increased economic activity. In most of these places, that promised economic boom never came, and so nation after nation has defaulted on these loans. Unable to repay, the countries have been forced to cede entirely.
It's the season for our senses.
Hear that?
I can't hear anything.
Exactly.
It's the season that feels more intense. The warm, dry days.
You're joking. You said by Wales.
And the crystal clear air that lets you see forever.
It's just impossible to take a bad bow in Switzerland. It's a flight the top of us paying.
We need autumn for our senses. We need Switzerland. I think I found something.
Your daughter, Kees. You're chasing a murderer. BBC First, jouw dagelijkse dosis misdaadseries.
Airports, shipyards, and railways to the Chinese government, giving up ownership entirely. China's Belt and Road Initiative has thus been re-termed as modern colonialism, with China at the helm. But with most underdeveloped nations, the allure of Chinese economic prosperity will entice them to agree to just about anything Beijing offers, or demands of them. It's no surprise that many of these nations suddenly find their government filled with pro-China yes-men, and importing tens of millions of dollars of surveillance technology. Along with Chinese infrastructure, all too often comes Chinese style of government, and the Chinese Communist Party has been all too glad to export its form of authoritarianism to the world, and how to maintain a modern surveillance state. With exports to over 60 nations, Huawei's become the global leader in exporting surveillance tech, with China even building entire surveillance networks for host countries. Slowly but surely, China is changing governments around the world, and the U.S. is inadvertently helping it. Under the Trump administration, the United States stepped back from its role as a global leader. This vacuum of power was quickly exploited by China, who was happy to infiltrate international economic and political organizations left reeling after a retreat from the United States. Due to ambiguity over the U.S.'s willingness to defend traditional Western values of liberal democracy and open markets, nations caught between a powerful authoritarian neighbor such as China and a desire for liberal freedoms found themselves questioning if it was politically survivable to continue to oppose the desires of their more powerful dictator next door. This was most obvious across the South Pacific, as nations such as Vietnam and Thailand were suddenly forced to consider the possibility that they may no longer count on U.S. support to fend off Chinese political or military aggression. But the failure of the Trump administration to fill even basic State Department positions, hundreds of them, for over a year, was another blunder that China was happy to exploit, sending its diplomats all over the world. With no American presence on the ground, nations even as close to home as Suriname in South America turned to Chinese interests. Now, for the first time since the end of the 19th century, the United States faces growing influence of a major rival in its own backyard. If China gained a foothold in South America, it would be the first time since the 19th century that any rival power has had a presence in the Western Hemisphere. This is as intolerable to the United States today as it was in the 18th century when it removed Spain as the last European power with any influence in the U.S. side of the world. This is a strategic victory for America that no other nation on earth has ever enjoyed, as it allows the United States to maintain a forward presence with its military around the world, capable of quickly responding to aggression for any bad actor. If China gains a political and military foothold in South America, the United States will be forced to realign some of its forces for homeland defense, severely weakening its place on the global stage. If the United States prevents China's ascension to global domination, it must once more take up the reins of global leadership and cease its retreat from the world stage. Thirdly, while still too early to tell, it appears that a new American administration has dramatically changed course. However, China's growing economic influence is not something so easily countered. Even if African and Middle East nations are growing increasingly aware of the exploitative nature of the Belt and Road Initiative, the same can be said about China's growing military might, with Taiwan finding itself in the difficult position of resisting a growing giant on its doorstep, while unsure if the United States will really defend it or not. And as the U.S. continues to hesitate on the global stage, the rest of the world is starting to have to ask itself the same question. Is it better just to appease the Chinese Communist Party, or run the risk of becoming its next victim? Can you imagine an official edict telling you that you must kill your beloved dog? Or what about getting interrogated by the secret police just because you like a certain type of flower? It's happened in China, and you'll soon know why. But first, no porn, please. We're Chinese. November 2021. Police in Shanghai were knocking down the door of a 38-year-old man while he was frantically deleting files from his laptop and phone. Pornographic movies were on those devices, and in China, that's a big no-no. The man was actually an award-winning movie director named Shen Zhihui. His media company had fallen on hard times during the pandemic, and so he decided to try his hand at making porn movies. According to media reports, for each film he made around 30,000 yuan, but since he'd started his enterprise, he got around 1 million yuan. He made that in the space of a year, so as ventures go, making porn wasn't too bad. He did actually manage to get rid of much of the evidence, but the cops found details about shooting costs on one of his devices. One of the actresses told the cops that she'd only agreed to take part in the movies if the director agreed that he'd only release them outside of China. But of course, they managed to make their way into China. In fact, the police found out about them because the mother of a 12-year-old boy had found porn files on his laptop and gone to the cops to complain. The kid wasn't arrested, or at least in the reports they don't say he was, but we find some other reports which said some Chinese people had been arrested for merely watching porn. To do that, they had to use a VPN to get around China's infamous Great Firewall. So you have to ask, why is China so down on porn when most countries it's accepted if not frowned upon by some parts of society? It's actually been illegal in the country for decades, with the main reason being the communist government says it wants to protect minors and maintain public morality. It doesn't mean people don't make homemade porn or watch it. All you
So your
pornography
specialty
fishing
vehicle is
out there
available
will
for
still know
collection
they're
right
gonna watch
now.
Chinese
We hope
porn
you're
available
very
online.
happy, sir.
Still, if you were
Come
found
again.
making
Goodbye.
it, you could get into trouble. As for just watching it, most Chinese people wouldn't worry too much about getting that knock on the door. One Chinese man was asked online about the consumption of porn in this country. He replied, "If you just watch some sex, take it easy. As long as you don't spread it and download it too much, nothing. Yeah, nothing will happen to you. And my roommate has 5 gigs of these movies to watch at night. This next bit of information could save your life one day. Cross at your own risk." In most countries in Europe and North America, if you see a pedestrian crossing the road, sometimes it's on what's called a zebra crossing. Can't expect cars to yield. Not so much in some countries in Asia. For instance, if you've ever been to Thailand and you think you can just walk over a zebra crossing and everyone will stop, you could end up being one of those tourists killed in Thailand statistics. Looking at forums, it seems there are a lot of foreigners asking why this is also a practice in China. Cars just don't stop, even though those black and white blocks seem to suggest they should. One American writing about this said, "After living in China for 5 years, I've grown piękny dzień. Przygoda czeka. Jesteś gotowa?
Jasne.
I fajnie. Do drogę.
Witam! W domu!
Ostrożnie, tam są talerze.
Zaniosę je do salonu.
Oddzwonię do ciebie.